Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Katz, and welcome to Tuesday's edition of WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle, where we do tell it like it is. Friends, Inside the Trojans Huddle is a game-like panel discussion that is posted Tuesdays in the off-season and twice during the regular season. The huddle features WeAreSC columnists, staff writers, and historians. We first start off with the pregame show, where we introduce our panel members for this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, and then give you the latest USC Trojans football news. Let's first meet our panelists for today. A WeAreSC columnist who writes WeAreSC.com's The Monday Morass, Yay or Nay, and Sunday Takeaways, in addition to regular season football and basketball reports. He also hosts his own podcast show entitled Locked On USC, Marc Kulkin. A former William Jewell College DB and WeAreSC columnist who writes the popular WeAreSC.com column Musings with Arledge, and has his own weekly WeAreSC.com video show, Musings with Arledge Solo Edition, and is a graduate of the USC Law School, Chris Arledge. And a reminder that this week on Musings with Arledge Solo Edition, Chris will have as his guest former Pete Carroll offensive line coach at USC, Pat Rule. You won't want to miss that interview. It's a good one. And weekly WeAreSC columnist who writes Fridays the Obvious and Not So Obvious, IMHO Sunday, and is an active member of the Football Writers Association of America, your moderator and producer of Inside the Trojans Huddle. That's me, Greg Katz. Before we kick off this Tuesday's edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, here's an update in USC football news. The Trojans began the third week of spring practice last Tuesday, heading into the month of April with the conclusion to spring ball culminating with the annual spring game on Saturday, April 15th in the Coliseum at noon. USC tight end Malcolm Epps announced last week that he's entering the transfer portal. Epps, who originally transferred to USC from Texas, finished the 2022 season with just 3 receptions for 18 yards and 2 touchdowns. On the personnel front, USC officially hired veteran Greg Brown as a senior defensive analyst, Trey Tinsley, son of former Trojans quarterback Scott Tinsley, as a offensive grad assistant, and Brendan Bookie Radley Hiles as another defensive analyst. And a recruiting note, having set this Saturday, April 1st as his deadline, 5-star tight end Deuce Robinson from Phoenix is expected to announce sometime this week what his college choice will be. USC and Georgia remain the favorites. Friends, WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle greatly appreciates your viewer and listenership, and we encourage those of you watching on sites like YouTube to click on the red subscriber button and like button. It's greatly valued and it's free. You can also listen to Inside the Trojans Huddle on many available podcast sites. And a reminder, WeAreSC.com is offering a subscription special. You can get all the WeAreSC premium content for just $29.99 up to August 31st, 2023. That's the cycle. Or you have another option, $9.99 per month. So take a look at that. We'd love to have those of you join us. So with that, let's get into the first half. But before we begin our official opening kickoff of topics, we'd like to recognize and reflect on the recent passing of legendary Southern California sports columnist and WeAreSC contributor Steve Bisheff, who unfortunately passed away last week at the age of 81. Steve was a USC graduate, former Daily Trojan sports editor, and a member of the USC Athletic Hall of Fame, who wrote for the Old Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, San Diego Union Tribune, and the Orange County Register. He also co-authored and authored by himself a number of successful books on USC football. And of course, he was an occasional guest panelist and contributing writer on WeAreSC. All right, so panel, we're going to kind of start off with just a little bit of a memorial to Steve. We'll start off with asking you, give us your thoughts regarding the late Steve Bisheff. I know some of you are kind of new to Steve, but your general impressions of Steve, both as a reader and in interaction with him. So Marc Kulkin, start off, thoughts on Steve Bisheff.
Yeah, I mean, my interactions with him are obviously very limited, but really enjoyable. I mean, the guy was an historian. I mean, he was old school. He was he liked to, I don't know, I guess the best way to describe him is tell a story. Huge USC fan, obviously. You mentioned he wrote a couple of books. He did the one with Lowell Schrader, Fight On. Look, I'm not real good with these types of situations. I like to keep my feelings to myself. I thought you did a great job with your column, Greg. So as far as Steve, and what I'll remember is, if I could be just this much of the writer that he is, fantastic. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer. So I like to tell stories and look at things the same way I think that he looks at things, or look at things. So I don't know, maybe we're a little bit of a kindred spirit in that regard.
Well, I will tell you, Mark, that he thought highly of how you presented your topics. He enjoyed reading you, and you should know that, and that is a compliment. Chris, your thoughts on Steve?
Yeah, I knew Steve a little bit, but not real well. He was, as a person, he was polite and generous and humble, despite the fact that he was as well known and successful as he was as a sports writer. I'll leave the rest of the personal stuff to you, Greg, because I know you knew him very well. But I will say this: when you lose someone like Steve Bisheff, you lose someone with an unbelievable amount of knowledge of not only USC, but LA sports in particular. But if you're a USC football fan, college football is about tradition. And I've written a number of times about how important I think tradition is to college football. When you lose someone like Steve, you lose somebody who has just this unbelievable wealth of knowledge, someone who not only has watched the games, but he knew the personalities, and he had behind the scenes stories. And so for people who love USC and love the history of USC, who care about the old teams, the old players, when you lose somebody like Steve, you lose a lot, and you don't really replace that. It's just gone. So yeah, he's going to be missed.
Well, I will say to you, when you joined us early on, Steve was absolutely blown away by your ability to communicate, write, your knowledge. He said, this guy is really, really good. And, Steve, I've known Steve for a long time, but in the last 15 years, he's as close to a brother than I ever had. I was the oldest in my family. He did not have any brothers to my knowledge. And we clicked on every box, politically, socially, everything. And it's just one of those few people you meet along your life where you say, man, he's part of me and I'm part of him. And our chats at the Catella Deli in Los Alamitos were priceless. When Gary Paskowitz was alive, he would join us. It was just a wonderful person. I would say the best thing I could say about him is, as big an influence he was on me, and he was, and a big mentor to me in the sports field, and some of the nice compliments I think he said. I don't know if he's just being nice to me, but he was a better person than he was a sports writer, and he's in the Hall of Fame as sports writing. And that's really all you need to know. And the fact of the matter is, he wrote for the guy that wished that he could be in Steve's position. He wrote for the guy who says, I'd like to go in that locker room and ask Lincoln Riley this question. And Steve felt a complete responsibility to readers to ask the questions that he knows that they wanted. And he wasn't afraid to state his opinions. I think the one thing that I'll leave this with from a professional standpoint, Steve could say in one sentence, would probably take me 3 or 4. And he kept mentoring me to how to cut down how much I was writing. And he had this saying that I think is important. He used to say, leave the readers wanting more. In other words, as good as your column is, or as good as the information you're giving, make them, especially in a column format with bullet points, make them wanting more so they'll come back and read you again. Whether they agree with you or they don't agree with you, a columnist is supposed to give an opinion, but make it brief. And so I guess I'm still working on that. But Steve, we're going to miss you. And hopefully in heaven, you're already writing a column for your new audience. So difficult situation, but a great, great guy. So let's transition into the main gist of the first half of Inside the Trojans Huddle. We're going to take a look at the Trojans offense thus far in spring. Most of you know this, all of the websites, all the major newspapers, the LA Times, everybody, we all have limited viewing access, but you can kind of piece things together. Marc has been down there at practice religiously. You can read the stories, you can watch the videos, the interviews, and you kind of bring it all together. And then Riley has a press conference on Saturday at noon, this last Saturday, and he gets into it and we ask him questions. So we can piece together some things. So let's start off with this panel, despite the limited viewing. What is your view right now on the offense? What is your take on it with all these interviews? And we'll start off with Marc. What do you think you know about this team at this point in the spring offensively?
High energy, pretty spirited. I mean, that 12:30 Zoom call we were supposed to have started at what, 1:30?
Right.
So they're either enjoying practice or they're extending practice for a variety of reasons. And a variety of reasons could also be there's been a lot of recruits on campus. So again, a lot of energy, I guess, is the best way to describe what I've been able to see. And I think what the players convey when they talk to us after practice. But also that honeymoon period, as I think we're alluding to, it's over. They know they've got big business ahead of them this year. There's really not going to be any excuse. So they have a better understanding of what's expected of them, both on and off the field. So they're not trying to learn as well as win at the same time. I think that's what they were going through last year together, the coaching staff, the team, and they relied on the offense, obviously. So Brendan Rice, I think, probably said it best last week when we talked to him. He said, the players were trying to impress the coaches, and now they know they're good enough to play at USC, so they're just going out there and doing what they're coached up to do. So as far as the defense, everything is focused on the defense this spring right now. The offense knows.
Let's hold. I want to hear what you definitely say. Let's stick on the offense for the first half. Was there any particular individuals that you feel have been singled out as doing some really good stuff from your perspective?
Well, I mean, there's not a whole lot we get to see. I mean, so for me to highlight, hey, what's his name? Look great out there, stretching and skipping and hopping on offense. No, because you get to see some passing routes, but there's not a whole lot else going on out there. So I'm not going to blow smoke up there and say, hey, so-and-so looks great. You see a couple of great catches. Other than that, nothing really to report there.
All right, Chris, what have you gleaned from the information that you've read, videos you've seen? Riley's talking. What do you take from it?
Yes. So, I mean, let's start with what I was pretty sure I knew before spring started, because I know we're going to talk about question marks and the like coming up. But this is an offense that has a lot of guys who can catch the ball and run with the ball, right? It's going to be a fight to get touches with this group, because you already had quite a few returners who could play at running back and at receiver. You add to it a Marshawn Lloyd, who, if he stays healthy, is going to be a force, I think. You add a Zach Branch, who brings a level of explosiveness that I'm not sure USC has had in some years, and USC has had some really good skill position guys in recent years. And you're talking about a really deep group of skill position players on offense to go with the best player in the country at quarterback, a now very experienced backup quarterback who's a talented kid in his own right, and Miller Moss, and and a quarterback who was one of the top 3 quarterback recruits in the country coming out of high school. That's a lot of talent at the skill positions at USC. And so I'm excited to see what they do. And I just think if I'm one of those guys, when I'm thinking about what do I have to do in order to get the ball, you're gonna have to practice really hard, and you're gonna have to be very consistent. You're gonna have to know your assignments. All the things that high level competition can bring out of people, it should bring out of this group. Those guys know that they're easily replaced. Every skill position player on that team, except for Caleb Williams, knows he could be replaced by another guy on that roster. So I think you're going to see a group that works really hard and is really committed to perfecting their craft, because they're going to have to be, and that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I took from the information and the interviews that I was watching, and again, I want to emphasize Mark's point that the media really what they see is stretching and a few drills, and then we'll see you later in a couple of hours, and you would like to be able to say the offensive line's really getting off the ball and all that, but that right now that's not the case. We'll be able to give you a real big opinion on when the spring game is played. That I can guarantee you. But from what I gleaned from it was that Dorian Singer is looking good, and you get that information by listening to the players talk. A lot of the writers say who look good out there as a wide receiver if they're interviewing. They'll say Dorian Singer, he's really good. And Zach Branch, they've given a lot of kudos to, that he's made some great plays. I think there was one particular play where he really exploded. I thought an interesting point was the name Cortland Ford, about just what's going on with him. I think Lincoln Riley said on Saturday that, Ford is coming back from, I didn't even know this. Maybe Mark, did you know that he had off-season hand surgery?
I was sworn to secrecy, so I can neither confirm nor deny I knew anything.
Well, apparently, thanks to the head coach, you are now released from your secrecy.
Well, I did ask the question, to get him to open up about the offensive line, because, without mentioning names, I said, are you able to get what you want so far, knowing that there's a couple of guys out there that you've spoken up about who haven't been able to participate? And so
Right.
he finally said, hey, Cortland Ford, he had that procedure back in February. So we'll see how long he's wearing the yellow jersey. Well,
kudos to you for holding that information. Otherwise, we'd have to take you to the penalty box. Yeah, Ford is an interesting person. He's, the question is can he move to guard if they really needed him? He's got a lot to prove, and I guess he was a little bit down when he lost his position last year, so that's understandable. And you got to fight back. So, some interesting information. So let's move on here. What is the biggest question mark on offense remaining to be answered in the spring? What do you think, Mark?
It's the O-line. Look, Chris nailed it. You still have Caleb Williams. You've got skill players that are just lined up, waiting to catch a pass from Caleb Williams. You had a pretty good running back room, and then you made it better by bringing in Marshawn Lloyd. So I think offensively everything is fine until we get everything figured out up front. Right now, you've got Justin Dietich and Jonah Monheim. Those are your known commodities. And until Cortland Ford is healthy and can lock down that left tackle position, you've got both tackle positions that are kind of up in the air. So for me, it's the O-line. That's the issue. A lot of talent there, not a lot of concern. That's where I'm going to be focused.
All right. So what are you looking at, Chris? What's the biggest question mark on offense remaining to be answered?
I want to know if the offense can run the ball when the defense knows they have to. USC is not going to have any trouble throwing the ball all over the yard. We know that, right? That's a given. There are too many guys who can run and catch, and the quarterback position is too good. They're going to be able to throw the ball. because they can throw the ball that well, because you have to be worried about covering all that speed in the secondary, they're going to be able to run the football too. That's not a problem. What I want to know is when you get the ball back with a 1-score lead and 3.5 minutes left, and the other team knows that you have to run the ball, can you run it? If it's 4th and goal from the 2, can you run it in? That's what I want to know. I suspect they'll be able to. I'm actually very bullish on this offensive line. I think there's a ton of talent, a ton of size. When Ethan White gets here, the second team All SEC interior guy, when he shows up and they plug him in, and they're going to have to plug him in somewhere, you have far too much experienced talent on that line for it not to be very good. But that's my one question. USC was very good offensively last year. At times, they were overwhelming offensively, and at times not so much. What I don't know that they could do is run the ball, and they absolutely had to. And so that's what I want to know, because if they can do that, there's no stopping this offense. They're going to score 50 points a game.
Yeah, I'm going to say that the offensive line is. I want to see who's going to be in what position, and I think you brought up a good name there, Ethan White. Man, I really wish he was playing in spring ball, because that extra 15 days of practice would really kind of settle in. I guess we're just going to have to wait until training camp to see him, unfortunately.
So
But
what would you rather hear though right now, at this part of spring camp, that the offensive line is doing well, or the defensive line is maybe getting the better of them?
that's an excellent question, and and I will say this, and it's not a cop out, but this is a good question that you bring up, Mark. This is what happens when we can't watch scrimmages, when we can't get an idea of one unit looks better than the other. So right now we're kind of in the dark, unfortunately. But like I said, when that spring game plays, we're going to be laser focused on looking at the offensive and defensive lines and trying to figure out what's going on. And even if they don't open up the playbook, you can't shut down an offensive and defensive line going at it in a spring game. But it's a curious situation, but offensive line for me. So let's transition. Given what we know of the first couple of weeks of spring ball and offense, if Lincoln Riley hypothetically allowed the media a chance to view a full spring session practice, what offensive position group would you go first to watch, and why? Maybe that's a rhetorical question at this point, but Mark, who would you go watch first?
Yeah, I made my case already. It's the offensive line group, because and for me it's going to be a little bit different. They're kind of like the group of mystery when we do go to practice. They're so far away, you see the least of them. So I want to see the most of them in that opportunity that I would be given. And I'm a big fan of watching how technique is taught, and that's one position group where technique probably balances out any athleticism you might lack. And Coach Henson is supposed to be known as a really good teacher. So I want to see him in action with his pupils, so to speak. Also, I want to see, who's winning with my own eyes, those one-on-one battles. Gives me an opportunity to see, guys like Elijah Page. See how close is he? I mean, he's a true freshman, but he looks the part. We've heard coaches, Lincoln Riley and Henson talk about, guys like Mason Murphy. He looks, like what a tackle should look like. Elijah looks like what a USC tackle should look like. But again, I want to see those. I want to see those guys up close and personal. I posed the rhetorical question to you just a second ago. I'm hearing some of those guys that have transferred in are having some tough competition with the defensive line. So we'll see. I want to see those new guys.
Yeah, since you brought up the name Elijah Page, when I saw him walking up from the tunnel, he reminded me of like a Keith Van Horn, some of the taller tackles. He did not look like a guy who came to USC in midterm of his senior year in high school. that was a full-on dude right there.
He's
And
gonna look completely different a year from now too. I mean, that's just natural maturation.
absolutely, and that's why you would like to see them for longer than 20 minutes besides stretching. Chris, where are you going to go first? Okay, Lincoln Riley said, okay, it's full on. Where are you going?
Well, we'd all go to the same place, but because that's going to get boring, I'm gonna say I'll go look at the running backs. I'd like to see Marshawn Lloyd. I'd like to see how he looks out there. I want to see Rayleigh Brown and see whether or not he is whether he's a little bit more mature, maybe mature in his decision making. Because this is a guy who has an explosive element that's different. I want to see whether they can count on him to pick up 4 when you have to get 4 instead of trying to pick up 80 and losing 3. And I suspect he'll figure that out. I mean, eventually he's going to figure that out, or you're not going to play. I'd like to see that. I'd also like to see the 2 freshmen from Texas. Everybody knows about Lincoln Riley and quarterbacks. But the reality is, if you look at Lincoln Riley's career, he is fantastic at finding running backs that could play, right? At Oklahoma, every time you turn on the TV, they'd have a great quarterback, yeah, but they'd have 1 or 2 backs that were really impressive, could run the football. Lincoln Riley knows how to find running backs. Kyle McDonald knows how to find running backs. So I'm really looking forward to seeing these 2 kids from Texas and seeing what they've got. My impression watching their highlights from high school is that neither one is a burner, although they seem to run just fine. But what they seem to do is really break tackles, right? I mean, some of those highlights, these guys are just running through tackle after tackle after tackle. And so I'm excited to see what those kids can do. So yeah, everybody would watch O-line, but I'm going to say I'll go watch the running backs just to keep it different.
And I will say I would do the same thing. I'd go O-line first and then the running backs. And the thing about the running backs is, having looked at video myself on them, they're exactly the type of running back that Coach McDonald likes. If you saw his running backs at Utah, they break tackles, they're tough, and they really kind of grind you down in kind of almost a Charles White fashion. So it'll be interesting to track their progress. All right, let's move on here and finish up the segment of first half. Panel, sometime this week, 5-star tight end Deuce Robinson from Phoenix will set an April 1st, which is next Saturday, deadline for announcing his college choice. Interesting connection there. I think it's pretty much that we all saw the tweet sent out by Lincoln Riley, the 2 fingers, meaning somebody just committed. I talked to a source and I said, who do you think it is? And we both agreed that we thought it was Deuce Robinson. So the question would be, if it is, when does he announce? And is he going to do it on television or however he's going to do it? But getting a little deeper here, given the USC tight end depth with the departure of Malcolm Epps to the transfer portal and Ethan Ray out at practice, how important is it to sign Robinson? And again, Robinson's deciding supposedly between USC and Georgia. Give me your Robinson signing prediction, and what would it mean if Deuce does sign with the Trojans? How would he fit in? Mark, prediction and evaluation.
Yeah, he's going to be committing to USC on April Fool's Day. And what's so funny is I was actually at Elite 11 on Sunday, and I was talking with Walker Lyons' parents when I saw the bat signal flash on Twitter. So it's almost like Lincoln Riley is becoming the tight end whisperer, because I was hearing a cool little story about how, Walker had actually, the last in-home visit was with Georgia and with Kirby Smart. The last contact was with Lincoln Riley. Scott talked about this on the message board today. So it turns out that Lincoln Riley does know how to recruit tight ends. Now we're going to find out if he's going to start using them more at USC. And just to put a little bow on that, I was told that Malcolm Epps jumping in the portal came as a complete surprise. They weren't aware of it. Because remember, Lincoln Riley was talking about there's going to be more movement. And then the day after, Malcolm Epps jumped in the transfer portal. But from what I was told, he wasn't aware of that. He didn't know that was going to happen.
Which is curious because you think, well, maybe he's jumping in the portal because Robinson's going to sign with USC and he thinks he's going to get lost in the shuffle. I don't understand why he would leave. Obviously, he does.
Well, Deuce is going to, he's a really good player. And, maybe they saw something with Carson Tabarachi playing, he's moved over to tight end. And from what I understand, he's a really physical guy. He likes to mix it up, stick his nose in there. So.
Well, I know he's really excited because I saw the tweet that he had where it showed him carrying the ball, looked like a kind of an H-back swing pass. And he seems really excited about being out there. So that'll be something. Hopefully he'll play in the spring game so we can see what he looks like as, quote, an H-back or whatever. Chris, what do you think about what's your vote here on Robinson? What's he going to do? And what's he going to mean if he does sign with SC?
I don't have any inside information, but I think at this point, it would be a surprise to just about everybody if he doesn't pick USC. What does it mean? Well, what it means is that USC would have landed Mekhi Lemon and Zachariah Branch and Deuce Robinson to catch passes from whoever it's going to be, Malachi Nelson or Dylan Raiola or whoever it's going to be, right?
Miller Moss.
Miller Moss. It's hard to think of a better threesome than that for pass catchers, right? I mean, that's an extraordinary group. And we'll see what kind of tight end he turns out to be. I suspect he's going to be the sort of tight end that's lined out wide quite a bit because he's so athletic, and I think they're probably going to use him more as a big wide receiver than anything else. And having a tight end that can do that can get out and play wide receiver really poses problems for the defense, right? Because it's a matchup issue. You don't want to be in a position where you have a linebacker moved out trying to cover Deuce Robinson. And if you have to bring in a bunch of extra defensive backs and you can slide in a guy like that to tight end and run the ball with all these running backs that I think are going to break a lot of tackles, that's a problem for people. So having that kind of weapon at tight end is pretty important. USC can do without a tight end this year and score a ton of points, but it sure is a nice thing to have, especially in the red zone. So yeah, if he chooses USC, and I think he will, then I'm looking forward to adding his talents to an already stacked group of pass catchers.
Yeah, and I will say that I think he's going to sign with SC. I think the longer this has gone on, the familiarity of being so close from Phoenix to Los Angeles for his parents. His dad grew up in Diamond Bar. There's a lot of things that when you finally said and done, you go, you know what? He loves baseball. My question is I know he loves baseball, and it looks like Andy Stankiewicz has kind of revived the Trojan baseball program a little bit. Maybe he'll decide to play some baseball, which would be good athletically for SC, both football and baseball. So that's kind of an interesting proposition, but I wish he would announce already, just
real quick on that note, Greg. And the reason why I was talking with Walker's parents, for anybody who's questioning, his younger brother is a quarterback prospect in 2026. His name is Ryder, and he's going to be actually competing for the starting job this year at Folsom up in Sacramento. So as far as baseball, maybe Austin Overn, the wide receiver, he might not ever play football at USC. He's really good at baseball. So
Mark, I want you to clarify for our viewers or listeners on the status of Walker Lyons. He's going on a mission. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, 1-year mission. He's actually prepping for that right now in Arkansas. And then in a few weeks he'll be heading to Norway, and then in a year he'll be at USC. But rehab is going great. He'll be ready to go.
Yeah, he looked just outstanding on video of him. I was very impressed, and obviously if he's not going to be at SC this particular season, that makes it a little bit more reasonable that Deuce would get in there. But when you watch Deuce play in these all-star games and stuff, he is a man among boys. He is definitely a man among boys. he's going to cause a lot of damage, and he will catch balls. Pressure is going to be on Lincoln Riley to make sure that he gets the tight end the ball this time. All right. Halftime. We're going to change the subject here. Panel, USC is pushing season tickets for the 2023 home season, which consists of 7 home games, 2 non-conference games, and 5 conference games. Prices per game depend on the opponent, and there are a number of ticket price options. As of now, a seat on the 50-yard line mid-level costs $675, which averages out to about $96 per game. A mid-level seat behind the closed end of the Coliseum goes between $595 and $450 per seat, which averages out to $85 and $64 respectively. The question I have for you is, in this day and age of ticket prices and fluctuating per game, who they're playing, do you believe that the USC season football tickets are overly priced, about right, or underpriced? Chris, Arledge, what do you think?
Well, first of all, can you actually buy a 50-yard line mid-level
Thank you.
seat without first donating $10,000 or whatever it is to USC? Because I think the answer to that is no. That ticket's not $96 per game. That ticket is substantially more. If it were $96 per game, that would be a steal.
Right.
I don't have a problem with the ticket prices. I think that major college football is essentially a pro sport. The head coach is probably making around $12 million a year. I mean, so I would expect that USC tickets are going to be similarly priced to Rams tickets. And frankly, USC is a better watch this year. So I don't have a problem with that. What I do have a problem with, and I'm not accusing the current administration of doing this because I don't know, but before I moved to Dallas, when I was a season ticket holder, we would get moved around all the time, depending on how successful the team was. So when Hackett was still there, I'm sitting at the 40-yard line. And then once Pete Carroll came in and started winning, I was getting pushed farther and farther and farther and farther away just because I wasn't interested in giving them many thousands of dollars in a donation. That I didn't like very much. I understand why they did it, but I wasn't thrilled. But my issue was never the price per game. Didn't have a problem with that. It's what do I have to pay you in order to get the $96 per game for those 50-yard line seats? That I have a bigger problem with.
Well, Mark, you were a long time with the Thundering Herd. So you have kind of a little bit of a background here like Chris, and do I, with the season ticket thing. Do you think that the prices, they're overpriced, about right, underpriced? What's your thoughts?
No, Chris nailed it. I mean, as long as there's no PSL pricing on top of the per game ticket price, Greg, that you mathed it out for us, price is fine. Like you mentioned, I was standing with the Herd, and we were I guess we had that tax exempt status, so we weren't charged the donor fee, and we were never moved around, Chris. So that was one of the advantages to where we were. Now, though, they don't have that routing section anymore. And I believe you have to pay those donor fees just for those seats, which were, section 13 on the wall, literally on the tunnel wall, about literally 14 rows up. So yeah, as far as pricing, no, that's good. And especially knowing that the team is, trending up, the prices are going to go up. They're joining the big conference. You're going to have better games going forward. So people have to understand the supply and demand, what it comes down to. When USC sucks, it's easy to get a ticket. When they're good, get in line. You might be sitting with Bruce Willis 10 rows behind me.
Let me ask you, Mark, explain to people what the Thundering Herd was, and explain even to me why they disbanded or they've gone their separate way. What's the deal with that?
Well, it was just an area where fans who were tired of being told to sit down could go and stand up for the whole game. That's another, I guess, thing that you pay for when you sit at the 50-yard line. You're paying to tell people, sit down So people behind you can stay seated and watch a football game that's really exciting. So the Thundering Herd was a couple of rooting sections, sections 11, section 12, and 13, where you knew that if you bought your tickets there, you were going to be standing the whole game. It brought in a little bit of extra energy, we thought, to the crowd. And why it disappeared? Well, when they did the reclamation project, Steve Lopes decided that we weren't necessary anymore.
That's ridiculous.
Well, I asked him directly, do you plan on having that type of environment again where fans can congregate, and stand up and watch the game? And they pointed out to the peristyle end where, yeah, you can pay and buy drinks and eat. It was that BMW or that Audi section, whatever it is.
I just frosts me to hear what you're saying, because I think one of the big gripes is when SC seems to forget about the people that were with them when things were down. Okay. I thought the Thundering Herd did a great job of being support when they needed the support. They turned a positive into an extinction. And I just think it's just criminal that happened, because the people that were in the Thundering Herd are about as devoted as you can get. And they proved it by organizing. And so it was a great name, the Thundering Herd, based on Howard Jones's teams of the 1930s. And to disband them, force them to disband, whatever the case may be, is just it's ridiculous. That's just my viewpoint on it.
I think it was the perfect storm. I was just going to say, it was the perfect storm. The Coliseum was getting redone. USC went through their sanctions. They're trying to keep fans separated from the team as much as possible. Remember, that was in the Halcyon days, fans and USC practice went together like, Cantors and a bagel. They went together. So there was just a big separation that was going on, a culture shift, so to speak. And, people move on. And as I mentioned, when USC football isn't doing well, even fans who were part of the Thundering Herd decided, you know what? Better value from the couch. I'm sorry, Chris. I didn't mean to.
No. I was just going to say that I agree with you, Greg. I think there's also there's something short-sighted about that, because one of the problems that USC has is that the Coliseum does not have a culture of being loud and obnoxious. And so there are times when the Coliseum can get loud. But for the most part, even when USC is pretty good, you have a lot of people sitting and watching and clapping politely. And it's nice to have that home field advantage that comes with a crowd that's really into the game. The Coliseum is already not configured to do that, right? Because of the bowl shape, you're too far away. It doesn't. You're not right on top of the players, and so it's hard enough. But really, they should be encouraging that where they can. And when the Thundering Herd was almost directly across from the student section that was on the other side, and you had both of those sections that were standing and loud, I thought that really helped. So I think that was short-sighted, and it's too bad. But USC, if they're going to get serious about having a home field advantage, they need to find ways to encourage the fans to get into it more, and that's simply not the culture at USC, and really never has been.
Well, I tell you, when they finally put the DJ in there last year, my first thought was, oh boy, we're going to have to listen to this. But then I will tell you that it did get response from the crowd as the season was going, and I'm all for making it as loud and as crazy, and I don't know if I want it to be obnoxious like Oregon fans, but it definitely had an effect. So I was for that. They took away, when I was growing up, they had yell leaders on microphones, right? Block that kick, first down, some way to get the crowd involved. And I'm fine if they're going to have the DJ now and he's going to get them to yell defense or WeAreSC. I'm okay with that, because when you go to some of these other places, especially when they go to the Big Ten, it is wild. Okay, and they do it because they've got people, about 100,000 people at some of those venues. So, it can't be we're going out to California and it's going to be a nice vacation game. So hopefully they can, the people that aren't going to the games will be involved. So let's head to the second half. We're going to take a look at the controversial, scrutinized section of the team. That's the defense. Panel, despite limited media viewing time again, what was your takeaways on the defense from last week's spring practice week, having been on campus, or media information or video interviews? Chris, we'll start off with you. What did you glean from what you know of the defense at this point, starting with kind of working backwards with the defense from last week?
Well, Lincoln Riley is pretty excited about the secondary, particularly the corners, which was nice to hear. USC had some youth there last year, other than Blackman, who came in and played extraordinarily well. They had a lot of youth at corner, and frankly, they had youth throughout, because even Kalen Bullock was only a second-year player. So they had a lot of young guys, and the fact that Lincoln Riley is that excited about the competition at corner is good news. It means that we should be solid there, and it wouldn't surprise me if you see one of those guys playing a lot of the nickel spot. And look, in modern college football, being able to man up and play wideouts and do it effectively is extraordinarily important. And so that's my takeaway, is that Lincoln Riley's excited about the secondary, and if he's excited about the secondary, so am I, because that's a place where we really need to turn it up about 6 notches based on what we saw the last 2 years.
Mark, what was your takeaway from last week?
Yeah, no, Lincoln Riley is excited about the defense and the secondary. And, what I saw and what he's talked about is how much bigger they are. Chris kind of alluded to that, how young they were last year. Well, you have that natural physical maturation, and plus they've been, becoming BFFs with the weight room. So you can see the physical difference in a lot of these guys. But Lincoln is also really excited about, how physical the defense has been. They're, like I talked about at the beginning of the show, trying to get that same type of attack mentality that you see on offense instilled on the defense. And, he mentioned Chris's favorite player, Corey Foreman. He's having a really good spring camp. Now, I know Chris is like, that's just coach speak, so blah, 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 blah. I've heard from a couple of other players that they're going to back up what Lincoln's saying, and they have no reason to blow smoke. Corey he's mixing it up out there. He might even be causing some skirmishes because he's competing extra hard. So that's a good thing. So that's my takeaway. The defense knows everybody's eyeballs are on them. They understand that the team last year was really close to making the playoffs in year one. They're like, a couple injuries away, a few inches away from executing properly, from being in the playoffs. And they know that this year that margin for error is even smaller because the schedule is more difficult. So they know they have to kind of tighten things up.
Mark, do you think the position change of Foreman to from a rush end to basically being inside now is a big difference for Foreman?
I think so. I remember in high school that was his natural position. Hand in the dirt. Just he had a job. Go get the quarterback. And when you don't have to stand up and try and kind of outthink what you have to do to get there, just go be a natural player. That allows your abilities to kind of take over. And on that same note, keep an eye on Solo. I asked that question earlier. From what I understand, he's putting guys on their butts. I was told he has the most ferocious bull rush of anybody on the team. Don't let him get the crown of his helmet on you, because you won't finish standing up.
Hey, can I defend myself on Corey Foreman here for a second? Listen. I want Corey Foreman to succeed just like everybody else does. I've been honest about his play, which has been poor. And look, maybe he was out of position. I didn't think he had the athleticism to stand up on the outside. I never saw a burst from out there.
Right.
Well, you move a guy down inside, maybe down there he does have a burst. So we'll see. I'm thrilled that he's been talked about like that, because I would want nothing more than for Corey Foreman to prove me an idiot and get
Well,
about 12 sacks.
At the worst, his head coach is setting him up to fail again. So don't talk big about him if it's not happening.
Yeah.
We'll find out in the spring game.
Absolutely.
We get some sort of idea anyway. I thought the kind of the takeaways for me was when they talked about Christian Pierce from Rancho Cucamonga had a big hit on Barlow on a drill apparently, or scrimmage, where he stood him up, and for a guy that's a freshman basically to do that, it turned a lot of heads. I was interested that Sierra Wright is allegedly making a comeback again and is playing very well, which is a good sign. Lincoln Riley mentioned Covington is doing well, and Dominique Jackson, and of course the Foreman thing we just discussed. But I want to hit on a point here. It was something that Lincoln Riley said that kind of caught my attention. I want to see what you guys think about this. He said that he's taking part on the defense. I posed the question to him on Saturday about what is he applying to the defensive end of the ball. Remember, he said he was going to get more involved with the defense, and I asked him what, but he's made a comment where he says he's trying to impart a new mentality on the defensive players, and it stressed a mentality. My first thought, and then I'm going to open up and let you guys give your thoughts on it, was he has a defensive coordinator. He's got defensive coaches. Generally speaking, if you got Marv Goo or somebody, that creates a mentality, right? So it seemed kind of peculiar to me that the head coach has to go into the defense, talk with players individually about a mentality. To me, isn't that kind of the job of the defensive coordinator to set the tone on that? How do you guys feel about that?
Well, I look at it this way.
Okay.
The defense that Lincoln Riley inherited was an abomination, right? I mean, most weeks that last season before he arrived, most of the guys on that defense didn't look like they even wanted to be there. And by the time you get to the last game, half of them didn't show up for it. And so it usually does take some time to make a culture change, right? Culture changes usually don't happen overnight. I think to some extent, the culture change happened overnight offensively because he went out and brought in a leader that everybody was going to follow, right? When you bring in Caleb Williams and you see what sort of talent the guy has, and he comes with the sort of hype he has, I think he was able to make a culture change much more quickly. And not only him, but you had the returning Blitnikoff winner. You had a guy who comes back home from Oregon who is about as tough and dedicated a football player you're going to find, right? A guy that squeezes every ounce out of his talent. You're bringing in a lot of guys with significant leadership. I don't know that, and Shane Lee is obviously an excellent leader, but I don't know that on the defense, you had that same level of injection of top-notch leadership. And so it may very well be that it's taken a little bit of time to turn around the culture on that side of the ball. And maybe that's part of what's going on. But most of the time when you see even really good coaches, when they started a new program that's been down, it's usually the second year that things are better because it takes that long to turn around the culture and get people pointed in the right direction, right? It did with Pete, it does with a lot of them. So maybe it's just that. Maybe Lincoln Riley is over there making sure that culture is turned around, and if so, hopefully it works, because that unit decides whether USC wins 11 or 12 games or wins 9.
Mark, what's your thoughts on that? With Lincoln Riley providing a mentality for the defensive players. How did that strike you?
I think Chris hit on it. It's trying to bring the same, maybe the same aggressive edge and confidence that they were playing with on offense over the defensive side of the ball for some of the reasons that, Chris was talking about. It's not that they don't believe in their position coach or their defensive coordinator, but, as I talked about, it wasn't the offense that kept the team from making the playoffs last year. So having your head coach over there instilling and backing up that, hey, what your coach is telling you, this is the way to do it. And to have that same competitive fire that, a Caleb Williams has on offense, where even if his hamstring is, torn, he's telling the coach, I'm playing. You're not telling me to sit down. Finding that type of player, that type of mentality on defense, sometimes it has to come from the head coach on both sides of the ball. So maybe they're trying, to locate a leader from that perspective to find that same type of mentality, that same type of edge on defense that you see on offense when they're playing. When things aren't going great, you have to have somebody out there making sure everyone's still toeing the line.
All right, from information that you've gathered, what is the biggest question mark on defense remaining to be answered in spring, Chris? What do you think it is?
Well, if you're talking about position group, it's the defensive line. We hear good things about what's going on there, but the reality is that group has to be dramatically better, because up front, USC was pretty bad last year, and that was with an All-American who's now moved on. So if you're talking about position group, it's that. But really, the thing I want to know is this a defense that's going to put a hat on people and drive them into the ground? Because the tackling was so bad that you can't be a good defense if you can't tackle. I don't care if you're big and you're fast and you have the greatest schemes. I don't care what else you have. If you can't tackle, you cannot be a good defense. So that's the thing that really needs to improve. Those guys need to be able to wrap people up, drive through them, and put them in the grass. If they can do that, USC has a chance to be really good.
What do you think, Mark? What would you do?
Yeah, let's just start with the fundamentals. Tackle. You'll be fine. There's not a whole much more for me to add what we've already talked about here. So just I went back to the top. Instead of trying to impress the coaches, now just get out there, listen to what they're telling you, be in the right position, and then execute. If they do that, they've replaced enough players on the roster that we're not going to be able to keep going back and say, well, you know what, they inherited a bad roster and they're still trying to fix things. There's been a lot of turnover, and they've done it at the key areas where they need to do it. Chris talked about the defensive line. I'm going to focus more at the linebacker spot, because that's the link between the secondary and the defensive line, where they're saying a lot of good things right now. Seeing a lot of good things up front. We're seeing a lot of good things from the secondary. Have we heard the same glowing reports at the linebacker spot, other than there's a lot of potential?
Yeah, I will say the front seven for me, the down linemen and the linebackers. Okay, so given what we know of the first couple of weeks of spring ball and defense, if Lincoln Riley hypothetically allowed the media a chance to view a full spring practice for one day, what position group would you go to first to watch, and why, Chris?
I'm going to go watch the edge rushers. I want to see if USC has somebody who can get to the quarterback this year. In modern college football, you have to be able to put pressure on the quarterback, and they got very little production there last year. And when they did get production, it's because they're moving a 280-pound defensive tackle outside to do it. So that's what I want to know. Do they have somebody out there to rush a passer? If so, that and that alone will make the defense dramatically better.
Mark, what do you think? What group are you going to first?
I wish I had 3 eyeballs, but I'm gonna go to linebackers. I want to see. I want to see how physical they're gonna be. I'm just gonna go there. The linebackers. I've heard about the defensive line. I've heard, they're doing a lot of cross training with the defensive line and rush ends. We've hearing glowing reports about the secondary. Well, if I got one day, I'm gonna go focus on the linebackers and I'll do my own evaluations.
All right, for me, spring practice, when we were allowed to go, for me, it was about looking at individuals. So I was kind of like, maybe I want to see the linebackers, right? But then I said to myself, I really want to see is Anthony Lucas, the defensive lineman that came from Texas A&M. Tremendous talent. He explained why he left Texas A&M. It just things weren't going right there. And acknowledged big time defensive tackle out of high school, out of the Phoenix area. I want to see just how much he makes a difference when he's in there. And I want to see the others. But I also want to see Tackett Curtis, and I want to see the linebackers they've brought in to work in concert with the defensive line, because I think if they get that front seven together, it's going to make a huge difference. So for me, I want to see the defensive line and Lucas in particular. Linebackers, I'm curious because I always get curious about high school guys that come in the spring semester. So. On Saturday, Lincoln Riley also said that the 2023 defense has more talent, more size, and more strength. He believes it's going to be a good unit. When asked, the coach says he's spending more time, as we talked about with the defense, spending time with the staff meeting, player relations, spending time, as we said, the mentality of playing on that side of the ball. My question for you guys is, are you buying all of it? Some of it or none of it? Chris?
I'm buying it, and I'm buying it because for two reasons. One is I think Lincoln Riley's actually entitled to the benefit of the doubt. He's been fairly open, but also fairly optimistic since he got here, right? I mean, he said, we're gonna have to turn over this roster. Right. But he also didn't use that as an excuse to lose. He said, but we expect to be competitive from day one, and we're going to win. So if he's now telling us that the defensive roster is better and that there's going to be significant improvement, okay, I'll buy it. If he's not telling us the truth, or if he doesn't know what he's talking about, it's going to look very bad for him. So most coaches, I think, come from the Lou Holtz school, where you sort of downplay your prospects rather than get everybody too excited. So if Lincoln Riley's saying he thinks the defense is going to be pretty good, I think he genuinely believes it, and he's probably right. I think the defense, it's not going to be Georgia's defense for the last couple of years, but I bet they're going to be pretty decent. And if they're pretty decent, watch out, because that offense is going to score over and over and over again.
Mark, you buying all of it, some of it, or none of it?
Oh, I pushed it all into I'm all in. Every penny I own. I was told they're making the playoffs this year, despite the schedule, despite, all the glaring weaknesses that we've been highlighting. They are that confident they will make the 14 playoff this season. I'm all in. Take my money.
All right. Well, I'm going to be a little bit of the skeptic here. I'm going to say I buy some of it. I believe they're more talented. I believe they have more size. I really believe they're going to be stronger being in Wiley's weight program. But I need to be able to see with my own eyes, not words, but actions. I think you both brought up some very good points. But for me, maybe I would change my mind if I was actually watching them in their scrimmages. In fact, I'd have no problem if he said you can't come to practices, but we'll let you in for the scrimmages, but you can't really write anything about it. I'd be okay with that because at least I'd be getting some good foundation of where I think they're looking at, who looks good, who doesn't look good, what units look good. Because when they are scrimmaging, they are competing for positions. So you're going to see a full effort. So I'm buying some of it. Hopefully, if he says it's going to be a good unit and it does become a good unit, I'll be happy as happy can be. But if it doesn't be a good unit, there's going to be a big credibility gap somewhere along the line. I can guarantee you that. So with that, let's go into the overtime questions here, and then we'll wrap things up. Question 1 from IH8, and I think it's really going to spell out I hate ND. In Plano, Texas, it's IH8ND. For all the staff, who do you consider the best USC purely backup quarterback, as in one who did not become a full starter at USC? He says, I'd have to go with Matt Castle, as evidenced by his 14-year NFL career. How do you guys feel about that? Who comes to mind?
Hard not to agree with that one. I mean,
yeah, I think that's the right. I think that's the right choice. I'll give you another name that I don't think he beats out Castle, but Pat O'Hara, who had beaten out Todd Marinovich before he ripped up his knee just before the season starts. He had a long-time career as a pro, not all of it in the NFL. He played in the Arena Football League for a long time, and I think he won 5 titles in the Arena Football League, which is, that's not nothing. So I would go with Castle, but Pat O'Hara is up there. Maybe Kyle Wachholtz from Norco, who wasn't a full-time starter. He sort of split time with in '95, split time with Brad Otten on a Rose Bowl winning team. And I know Kyle from high school because he played at Norco and I was at Elsinore. And so those are 2 guys I can think of. They're pretty good players who didn't really become full-time starters at any point.
Yeah, I have to go with Matt Castle, especially that 14-year NFL career is fantastic. And again, the question was who did not become a full-time starter. So I'm going with Castle. All right, question 2 from Jay for USC. What are your thoughts on Foreman moving to the defensive line while dropping weight down to what we understand is 235 pounds? That's the weight I saw on the current roster, says Jay for USC. We've talked about Corey Foreman. Any comments about the weight drop as far as being moved inside?
yeah,
You think that's a big issue?
if Corey's 235, I'm 245. Look, he is definitely much heavier than I am, and I'm about 185. There's a big.
So he's at least 190. He's at least 190. You're saying, Mark? That's good. That's good. It'd be hard to succeed on the D line if you're not at least that.
Yeah, look, 230. They might have had him drop some weight. I don't think he's hovering around the 230, 235 mark.
So what do you think?
I've heard people express similar skepticism that they don't think that weight's even close to right. I don't know.
They think it's lower or higher?
Yeah, bigger. Yeah.
Higher, bigger.
They think he's bigger than that.
Well, coaches tend to fudge sometimes on their roster height and weight. So maybe they're fudging on this one. We'll find out when they face a physical offensive line. We'll see how it works. But an interesting concept. I think we've all gone over this one before, but it's from Reggie in LA. Fill in the blank. Zachariah Branch is the most explosive player since.
I've said it before on the show, Reggie Bush.
Exactly.
Yep.
Mark?
Is there a different answer?
Well, I think, Chris, at one time, didn't you also suggest maybe that RJ Soward?
But
Reggie was here since RJ. I just said that Zach Branch is probably has that sort of athletic ability, but with a better head on his shoulders.
Maybe the closest, and this is such a freaking stretch. I mean, and maybe he didn't get used enough, but Amon-Ra St. Brown was pretty athletic. He just didn't have the speed that Zach Branch had. What Amon-Ra lacked in speed, he made up with in power. So again, a big stretch, but yeah, since Reggie Bush, nobody.
I agree. So we'll wrap up today's final question from Barbara in Westlake, California. I thought this was very interesting, actually. I know this is not really a football question, but I noticed that the last men's basketball game in the NCAA tournament, we had only 3 cheerleaders while our opponent had a full cast. Doesn't this send the wrong message around the country? Would we do that for football? All right. Have at it, guys. What do you think?
Was it our best 3? I mean, it seems to me that our 3, I think our 3 best can go toe to toe with any full unit in the country. So as long as we're picking our best ones, I think that's fine.
I know what forced Barbara's hand on this one. I saw the same tweet from the writer from Indianapolis who was at the USC Michigan State basketball game. And the point was, USC doesn't care about basketball as much as they care about football. So
that's a true statement, by the way.
Well, we tell it like it is on this show. We
But
don't
it needs to change.
hold forward.
It needs to change, and especially moving to the big. You need to show that basketball isn't there just to fill the time between football season.
Well,
Do you think Notre Dame fans care as much about basketball as they do about football? I mean, Notre Dame's had some good basketball teams in the past, but they don't, right? They don't.
Look, I'm not disagreeing. It is what it is.
No.
When they move to the big, the fans are gonna call out USC fans, and
absolutely.
the writers are already doing it.
Yeah.
Well, I thought, when I first saw it, I said, you got to be kidding me. You're on national television, and don't tell me that you don't have enough money to send the entire group.
Got the entire dance force. So
what I don't know, and you can correct me on this, Mark. Basketball wise, the dance force supersedes the cheerleaders or song girls.
Yes, absolutely.
They better reassess that plan.
As far as playing time, performance on the court, the dance force 2-1 versus song girls.
Well, I'll tell you what, I can understand. Now, how many, for those that haven't seen the dance force, about how many girls are in that?
I'm sorry, one more time.
How many girls are in the dance force?
12, 15. I haven't taken.
Okay, and how many are
3 on the travel squad, though, Greg? There's only 3 on the travel squad.
That's the song girls. They were there for the basketball.
Oh, it's the song girls that only about 3?
It was the 3 song girls apparently for the men's basketball team. The entire dance force, it looked like, for the women's team that traveled to Vatek for their game.
Okay, let me get this straight. 3 song girls for the men's game and the entire dance force for the girls' game. Am I reading that correctly?
Based on pictures that are out there, correct. I haven't verified or confirmed these numbers.
Okay. Well, you're doing what you think is what we have, but boy, you better not send 3 song girls. I don't care how good looking they are.
The USC travel band, so you had half of them with the men's team. The other half was with the women's team.
Well, I don't know. Maybe the Big Ten has a ruling that says how many song leaders, cheerleaders, et cetera, you can have as visitors. But it seems to me you better be coming with a full-on perception group if you're going to be on national TV. Because
hey, Greg, let me just deal with this right now. Can I just fix this right now? Mike Bone, if you're listening,
I wish you would, Chris.
Mike Bone, if you're listening, and I know you are, I expect you to be on this show next week to answer our questions about this travesty, right? So get your answers straight, get them ready, because we're coming after you. I want to know the truth. Okay, does that fix it?
Mike's a basketball guy.
Well, I think you laid down the gauntlet to Coach Bone, and damn it, I get a hold of him. See if he'd be kind enough to come on the show. Your show, Chris Arledge.
Ladies and gentlemen, you hear it here first. Mike Bone will be here next week on Inside the Trojans Huddle to answer our questions about the song girls and basketball travel.
Okay? Eric's car just drove up the road. Right into the Pacific.
Well, I will say this. Whenever Chris says something, and I know we're joking about it, but I know he's serious about it. If he can get Mike Bone on, he's going to get him on. And, again, for those of you, and we'll end up with this, if you haven't seen Chris's show, video show, you really have to watch it. He does a great job in questions, and there's some answers on the show, like last week with Pat Harlow and Dan Owens, that were really revealing. Dan Owens' assessment of what he would do on defense compared to what he was seeing. Pat Harlow, who said he believed the offensive line did do a good job, besides Caleb Williams running around and scrambling. These guys know what they're talking about. You know, Pat coached at Jay Serra in the Trinity League. Dan Owens was a tremendous player for USC, and they, you know, it's kind of like reinforces what many of you that are watching or listening may be thinking. So tune into his show. Chris, is it a show that's always on a Wednesday, or does it fluctuate sometimes with your schedule timing?
It fluctuates with my schedule all the time, and I know that makes it difficult to watch, but that's just the way it is. So I'm hoping that we'll get it up Wednesday this week. It will probably be Thursday. Don't miss it. Pat Rule is a great interview. He has some great stories from the Pete Carroll days, but he also has a lot of interesting information, and he is brutally honest. So check it out. You're not going to be bored.
Well, I'll tell you what, I will be watching it. Hopefully you're going to have that next week, and perhaps the following week, if you can swing it. The Trojans athletic director, if he's available and is willing to do it. Now, the sinister laugh. Anyway, well, listen, a reminder, if you have questions or comments for our panel, go to either WeAreSC message boards and click on the thread that pertains to Inside the Trojans Huddle viewer or listener questions. That will do it for us on Tuesday's edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle. So until next Tuesday, a big thank you to our panelists, Marc Kulkin and Chris Arledge. Outstanding job, guys. And a special big thank you to all of you for watching or listening to Inside the Trojans Huddle. Have yourself a great week. This is your moderator, Greg Katz, saying, fight on, everybody.